I know a little bit went on in court today. A little bit went on before court too. All of the drama before court was from these two documents. So it's dated on the actual court filing or issuance of an order or minute entry. In this case, minute entry is dated June 2nd. It was filed electronically June 4th. So this is maybe explaining some of what went on between the judge and Lori. No, let's look at this one first. This one came down. This one had to have come down from the judge in the morning. And the way that I see it going is the sheriff's deputy or one of the detention officers comes in and says, all right, Lori, it's time for court. And she's like, I'm too sick. I can't go to court today. And they're like, and she's like, I told my team yesterday that I was too sick and I'm too sick again today. And the detention officer is like, all right, I'll tell the court. And he tells the court, and Judge Boreski's like, it is ordered authorizing the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office to transport the defendant to court using any means necessary to include force to secure the attendance of the defendant for his or her trial on June 2nd, 2025. So this was Monday before the Honorable Justin Boreski, courtroom 5D, South Court Tower. So using any means necessary. Oh my goodness. So when I saw that, I was like, holy cow. And it took me a minute to realize this was not for this morning, even though it came down this morning. And after I did my little live, I came back and read through them again and again and again. This was obviously before court because she showed up in court and she said, you drug me down here. Are you going to drag me down here like you did this morning? Right, Janelle? Judge Boreski is like not having it. He is not having it. We have the video from this morning's hearing before jury selection started. Yeah, Carolina, I think it's more of a father and petulant, maybe teenager. And there are people that have said, people that know her well that and grew up with her that have said she never matured beyond her like high school years, like emotionally matured. And it looks like that from all of these interactions. Yeah, it looks like it from all of these interactions. So that was before court on Monday morning. She gets in there, she does her, I can't proceed, I can't do it, I'm sick. And then he asks the deputy that's in there, the MCSO deputy that's in there, well, have you guys performed any medical evaluations? And he goes, something like, I don't know, I can check, but it'll probably take 24 hours. So the judge issues this order on Monday. So once again, it's filed on the 4th, but it's dated the 2nd. So this is for Monday. It would be beneficial to the parties and the court to have some objective measures of the extent of the defendant's illness. The court requests Maricopa County Sheriff's Office direct qualified medical personnel to assess the defendant within the next 24 hours. The court is not requiring the MCSO to divulge any HIPAA-protected information. However, Ms. Daybell may be required to produce some form of objective information if she is seeking any continuance beyond Wednesday, June 4th, 2025. It is ordered waiving any copay to the extent there may be a copay from the defendant required. So they're not, the money thing isn't an issue, but the objective measures of the extent of the defendant's illness. Yeah, they're not putting a thermometer on a light bulb. She was already seated, so I couldn't tell if she was in a wheelchair or not. So I asked a couple of the other media people, and they're like, no, she's not in a wheelchair. I'm like, oh, okay. She's not in a wheelchair. That's a new development. Let's watch footage, but then there's something that goes on after this that is off the record, and it's off of the microphones. And I was sitting with the media, so I was in the very back row and I couldn't hear it very well, but I got asked about it by one of the other people that were in the court, and they heard something different than me, but the two things might actually be connected. No objective clinical medical reason was found by the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. None.
All right, we're going on the record, State of Arizona versus Lori Daybell, CR 2022-001242. Can I have appearances, please?
Attorney Kay, on behalf of the state and for the record, the victim is present in the courtroom.
All right.
Daybell for the defense.
All right, I'm going to need you to scoot up to that microphone.
Ms. Daybell,
We also have present in the courtroom a representative from the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. Do you want to announce?
Yes, Your Honor. Joseph V. Hill on behalf of the Sheriff's Office and Correctional Health Services.
All right, after court on Monday, immediately after court, I ordered the Sheriff's Office to provide some sort of medical assessment of the defendant. I received a pleading late yesterday afternoon indicating that Correctional Health Services examined the defendant around 12:30 p.m. yesterday. The defendant was treated for one condition, and Correctional Health Services has indicated that from a medical standpoint, we do not find any clinical indications to miss court. Is that correct, Mr. V. Hill?
Yes, Your Honor, and we have additional information if you need it, but it's not much. But
all right. All right, let me turn to the defendant.
This is like a HIPAA violation come up.
Your Honor, first of all,
advisory co-advisory counsel is seated right next to her. This is unusual. Her paralegal was to her left sometimes today, and Pam Hicks is all the way back here behind her to the left. Other co-advisory counsel or advisory co-counsel. I think he says something to her about a HIPAA violation. So I'm going to back up just a couple seconds and see if we can hear that.
This is like a HIPAA violation come out.
Your Honor, first of all,
So you remember last hearing, he brought up a point, an objection about something that he wanted her to make, and she just wasn't like landing it. And the judge kept saying, no, that's not right. Nope, that's not right. Nope, that's not right. And Mr. Abernathy was like talking into her left ear, and then she would say something and the judge would be like, nope. He's like loudly talking loud enough now that the microphone can pick him up. And this may be what's leading up to that little thing that happened after we went off the record at the end of this. I didn't hear that. You can't hear that in the courtroom. You can't hear what's going over the microphones. You can only hear, at least not as well as we're hearing it on this stream. I got to back up one more time to hear that, because he's talking loud enough to be picked up at the microphone. And I would not be surprised if Judge Boreski is annoyed by that, because he's kind of like making an argument, but he's not allowed to make arguments because he's advisory counsel. He is not the defendant's counsel. He is not the lawyer for the defense or a lawyer for the defense.
It's not much, but
All right. All right, let me turn to the defendant. This is like a HIPAA violation come out.
So he says something
Your
about
Honor,
HIPAA violation.
first of all, can all of this be sealed? Anything having to do with my medical? I don't think that's something that all of this needs to be sealed, including the minute entry and
Hold on.
the response from MCSO, all these things.
I can seal the response from MCSO, yeah, but to the extent, well, do you have any other information you want to provide me as to why you're not medically able to proceed? Right now, the only objective information I have is that you were assessed and CHS sees no clinical indications of why you need to miss court.
They told
If
me
it's
that,
something you want to discuss on sidebar, we can do that.
that would be great.
All right, I'll ask.
Okay, now it's time to bloop, bloop, bloop through the sidebar, because it lasts a long time.
It's on proceeding.
Here we go. So she was complaining about whatever non-clinical objective symptoms she's having that might prevent her from representing herself. He says this.
Intends on proceeding with jury selection today. Depending on how things go, I don't know that I would make the parties do their opening statements or not, but that remains to be seen today. The court finds that the court has not been provided any.
It's interesting that the camera guy knows enough to zoom in on this mess, laying her head down on her arms on her desk because she has such a horrible headache that she just can't proceed. I wonder if Judge Boreski might have caused a little bit of that headache by telling her no. Would that give her a headache? I'm sorry, Lori, you can't get what you want. That probably gives her a little bit of a headache. I wonder what's the cure for that? A little zap from the rack belt? Did I say that out loud? That probably wouldn't cure the headache, actually. But I heard a word in the off-record thing that was related to that, but that's the only word I heard, and somebody else told me they heard something else. So let's see. But I just noticed that Mr. Abernathy was talking loud enough to be picked up in her microphone during that last exchange with Judge Boreski.
The objective medical information of why the defendant can't proceed today. Although the defendant expressed that she has a headache and is not able to proceed, she was able to fully advocate on her own behalf and articulate to me the reasons why she doesn't think she can proceed and seems to be of sound mind and ability to proceed. So we're going to bring the jury in. How many jurors do we have? We're still missing 6. Mr. Vigil, you can be excused.
thank you, Your Honor.
We'll give those jurors a few more minutes.
So what happens next is off the record. Judge Boreski gets up and disappears through the back door, which is what he usually does when recess. So he gets up, walks out the back door, which he's got to do his little flashcard key fob thing at the ring entry thing to get through his back door. And then a couple of seconds later, he comes out through a side door. And Pam Hicks gets up from her chair behind Lori and comes and stands around and kind of off to the side in front of her and is giving her like a sympathetic look. And she's complaining about something to Mr. Abernathy. And then something is said to the deputy that's the one that brings Lori in and out. And I would guess that he's probably got the remote control to the rack belt. Like if I were holding an auction and I were going to find one person to bribe for control of that rack belt, it would probably be that guy. But judge says something, Mr. Abernathy says something, and that deputy says something, And I heard from Mr. Abernathy the word ibuprofen. 99% sure that's what I heard. And that's the only word I heard in that conversation. But somebody else came up to me during the break after that, and said, I heard Mr. Abernathy say that's not even legal. And then the judge looked back at him and kind of rolled his eyes and walked back out through that side door. So I'm wondering if she wasn't requesting some type of medication to help with her headache. And they couldn't do it because it wasn't dispensed through the jail infirmary. Like, was he advocate? Is he like becoming a real advocate for her, for Lori, and being like, she's not being treated fairly? Because Pam Hicks was actually looking very concerned for her and very sympathetic. So it's, I don't know if it's working on them or if they're doing their job. But it was an interesting exchange off the record leading up to the break. There are 45 seats available to the public. So there are a total of 75 seats in the gallery. This is not Judge Boreski's original courtroom. His original courtroom only has 30 seats. So this has 2.5 times the number of seats. The front rows on both sides are reserved for families of the defendant and families of the victim. And the victim is still alive, so he takes up one of those seats. And sometimes they take up more of those seats, and they get those seats always, which is fine with me, obviously. And then the back row is taken up by media, so that's 15 for the media. So that leaves the 45, the middle and the 45, the 45 in the middle for the public. And it is literally first come, first serve. So there's a process that they have evolved with over time that is kind of frustrating. They did a different system for jury selection, and they said once you get in a seat, it's your seat for the day. But then they were also releasing more jurors and more jurors and more jurors because the jury was taking up half of the gallery. So as they released jurors, they released 8 after the first session, and then they released everybody but the 16 after they seated the jury. Around 2:00, I think 2:07. Get picked for jury duty? No, he did not. He was juror number 85, so he was like next to last for being picked for jury duty, because they literally go in order of chances of being selected from 1 to whatever the highest number is, and he was at the end. So he did not get picked. He thought he was funny. I think my instincts were right. When they went to lunch, they're supposed to take their juror numbers and their notebooks with them. He left his in the gallery where he was sitting down, because he's overflow. So he sat down like in the gallery. He left his notebook and his number there. You're not supposed to do that. He didn't care. He's intelligent enough to know what he's supposed to do and follow instructions. We know that from when he did his bio. What do I have written down for his bio? Because I was paying attention to their bios this time and I was writing them down. I couldn't keep up with all of them 100%. He's self-employed, 2 children, two children under the age of 18, 12 and 15. And I think he said he has 1 child over the age of 18. He's never served on a jury before. He's self-employed in the health insurance industry. And he also deals with retirement. And his wife and daughters own a bakery together that has multiple locations in Mesa and Gilbert and blah, blah, blah. And judge goes, hold on a second. Enough with the sales pitch. And everybody kind of laughed, but I found it kind of annoying that he's just that casual and loose, to do a sales pitch for his wife and daughters. He even named the bakery. I didn't write it down. I didn't want to. I didn't care. Plus, they were going through these bios so fast, I was not keeping up with all of the information. But he did a little sales pitch for his wife and daughter's bakery, and I found that annoying in a courtroom setting where somebody could spend 25 years to life in prison. JP, I don't know I couldn't identify who the lady was that said that. So I honestly don't know. And the judge apparently rolled his eyes. I didn't see that. I'm telling you something that somebody else that was there told me, and the judge rolled his eyes and went back out the side door. Lori put her head down and was making some type of sounds that we could all hear, but barely. But we could hear, and Nate Eaton was sitting next to me, and I go, is she sobbing? Is she crying? And he's like, that's what it sounds like. So she was crying and sobbing after that little exchange between the deputy and the judge and Mr. Abernathy and Lori somewhat. So follow JS_media88 on X if you want to see live trial updates. The judge introduced himself and his staff and his amazing, so there's a courtroom assistant and then there's a judicial assistant. And the courtroom assistant is the gal with the dark hair that just is all over, and she was all over it today too. So when they have positive responses, when they go through the voir dire and they ask, would anybody have a problem with this? Or does anybody feel a certain way about this? And you raise up your placard, and she has to get them a microphone so the judge can hear their responses. So she's literally running all over the courtroom. Like she got in her 5,000 calorie workout today. So the judge reads the jury instructions, and then he begins group voir dire, which means he asks everybody a question, and any person who has a positive response to that holds up their placard, which is the equivalent of raising your hand, except it has your number on it. So he can say, okay, juror number 21, why do you feel that way about that? And then Trina K introduces herself and her paralegal and the Gilbert PD detective that is seated at the table with her. So during the first trial, it was Chandler PD detective Nathan Duncan that sat with her. So she gets a detective at the table and her paralegal. And then Lori, and I was kind of worried about this because of how puny Lori sounded. That she wasn't going to be able to sound, that's okay. What I was worried about, she was going to try and sound pathetic to the jury. And she might even cause a mistrial if she were to say something like, I'm sorry that I just can't sound right today, but I'll do the best I can. I'm just not feeling well. That would be an instant mistrial. Boom, just like that. And I was worried she was going to do that. And she could have done that. And the fact that she didn't tells me that she wants out of Arizona and she wants to go back to Idaho. She does not want this. She does not want to spend any more time in Estrella, Maricopa County jail, than she has to, although she's already caused herself a couple of delays. She wants a speedy trial. She doesn't want any continuances, but she doesn't want to, she doesn't feel good enough to proceed with jury selection in this one. So one of the things I noted was the judge starts to talk to the jury now. So after Lori does hers, she does her introduction of herself and her team, and she sounds fairly strong voice, fairly, articulate. She does not sound like she did earlier when she was whining to the judge about her headache. She sounded differently, noticeably differently. So after she introduced herself, the judge starts talking about financial hardships of being a juror. And he says, if you experience loss of income, we can reimburse you up to $300 a day. Plus you get a $12 daily stipend, probably, related to food costs. Go down and get lunch for $12, which I did. So you're able to do. And then you also get reimbursed for mileage to and from court. So if you're in the outskirts of Maricopa County, that could be significant, because I think the IRS rate is around 60, 65 cents, somewhere between 55 and 65 cents a mile. So then he talks about the court schedule, and there's going to be a revised court schedule because of what she did on Monday and having to take off Tuesday in its entirety. So we've had to adjust the court schedule by 2 days, including having to work on Friday. So we already know juror number 4 was released yesterday because he has a camping trip Friday morning. So yes, who has a schedule or who has a conflict? Juror 21 says I have a work schedule conflict. Juror 34 says I have an endocrinology appointment. Juror 76 says Juror 76 says I was thinking about moving. No, I'm saying this in a Southern accent. He didn't say it in a Southern accent, but I'm doing that because it's. He says I was thinking about moving to Flagstaff, and I have an appointment on Saturday to go look at a new apartment, and I was thinking about also going up on Friday to look for a new apartment. And the judge says, well, when is your appointment on Saturday? And he says, whatever time it was. He's like, so are you driving up there and staying like in a hotel room or something? And juror 76 was like, no, I'm driving back and forth both days. And the judge is like, okay, thank you. But we'll find out later the judge was thinking what I was thinking. And then is there a financial hardship for any of you? Juror 71 says, I'm a 1099 employee and your court system will not reimburse me because I don't get my 1099 paperwork for my employer till the end of the year. So I cannot present something to them, to your court. So the judge says, okay. Then he asked them about presumption. Do any of you have a problem with presumption of innocence, law enforcement, the facts of evidence? Do any of you have family that are law enforcement? Do you or your family have any legal training? There was one person that said they worked in kind of like a law office as kind of a paralegal type of thing. And he said, would that, affect your ability to be fair and impartial in this? And of course she said no. Do you know of anyone else that has served on a jury? None. All right. So he has his usual questions that were very similar to the group voir dire that he had last time. And then Trina K begins her group voir dire. Same questions she had to start out last time, which is this defendant is representing herself. So knowing that she's not an attorney, would you make her bar lower or raise the state's bar in, expectations? And nobody raised their placards. Then she asked a couple of case specific questions. And she says, this case will involve some things about the LDS religion. Do you have any problems with that? The victim drove a Tesla, and some people have a political way of thinking about people who own Teslas. Do any of you have that? Would that affect you? Nobody. And then she says, we may have to present the order of witnesses out of order of how this thing happened chronologically. Would any of you have a problem following along with it? Said you guys can keep notebooks and you can refer to your notebooks when you go to deliberations. And then do you have any religious or personal beliefs that would preclude you from judging others? And nobody raised their placard for that. Then Lori begins hers. And the very first question she says is, does anybody recognize me? Then she asks, have you ever served on a jury? Do you have a problem presuming that I'm innocent? Do you have any non-jury court experience? These were interesting because there's a felony DUI, a custody battle, a misdemeanor DUI, a custody battle, a DUI, and divorce court. Those were the positive responses to that. And of course, the follow-up to that is, would that affect your ability to be fair and impartial in this trial? And at one point in time, when she's asking these questions of the jury, she's one of the affirmative responses requires follow-up. And it's one of the ones early on in these, all those that I just listed now. And Judge Boreski says, would you like me to follow up with that? And she responds, if you want to, like just in a very flippant manner. And I'm like, don't let this start again. Don't let this start again. But by the way, during this entire interaction with the jury, her voice is strong. She's sitting up fairly straight in her chair. She's behaving fairly normally, and she's sounding fairly normally. She's articulate. She says a couple of times when jurors have positive responses and they involve some personal detail, she goes, well, thank you for your honesty. I appreciate that. And I'm like, where is that Lori in this whole mess? Where is that Lori in this whole mess? Thank you for your honesty. I appreciate that. And then she asked, this was a funny thing to me. She asked how many people here are gun owners. So this case involves firearms. How many people here are gun owners? Probably like 35, 40% of the people raise their placards. It's Arizona. There's a high percentage of gun owners. And then she goes, how many people have ever been to a gun range? And like 99% of the people raise their placards. I thought that was amusing. It is Arizona. And it's funny because this jury pool is probably pretty equally balanced between men and women and all different ages of men and women. Friends or family served on a jury. Is there anything we haven't asked you that could affect your ability to serve on this jury? And one guy raised his hand. He said, you haven't asked me if I have any friends or family that have had to go through a legal process. And apparently he had the judge says, well, tell me about that. Would that affect your ability to serve on the jury? And he says it might. All right. So now we're at 11:47 a.m. We're right before lunch and the jury leaves for a break. The judge dismisses them and says, okay, we're going to talk about this between the parties. And we're going to decide if we can dismiss any of you from potential jury duty. And they go through 8 of them. Juror 21, 28, 34, 76, 67, 79, 72, 84. So that one that I just said that he had a problem, I didn't write that one down, but he was one of the ones. And they just said, out of an abundance of precaution, we're going to dismiss him. And then I have to read from my Twitter on this because the way that this goes down for selecting the jurors to get rid of, and I talked about this a little bit on my lunch live, is he says, this is my opinion about this juror that had a positive response. How does the state feel about it? And the state says, we agree that he or she should be precluded. How does the defense feel about it? And Lori's voice drops to nothing. And after a couple times of that, the judge says, I would just like to note that when the jury is present, the defendant can talk and act normally. But as soon as the jury left, but what he said was something like, apparently now she can't speak. So there was that. Like he's officially putting on the record. There you go, Trace. If I could find your old comment that you put up there, he put on the record. He did put that on the record that her behavior is ridiculous. Her voice, her acting. Okay. So it's lunch break. I go down and I do my lunch live. We're down. So we started with 51 on the day. We got rid of 8. So we have 43 left. So that means there are more seats for the public to come in and sit after lunch and more people get to come in. So I wrote down the exact quote that I wrote down were that her voice, appearance, and mannerisms are perfectly normal in front of the jury, but now apparently she can't speak. That's what she resorted to after the fact. So we have jury selection afterwards. Do we need like a little bit of a interlude in here? Like a little bit of a jury selection break, or do you guys want me to keep going through the day and get through it? Let me get back to StreamYard. Everybody's having their own little party in chat and I'm missing it. Yeah, salty, right? On the record. He didn't say on the record, but it was on the record. Yes. Let me just note that her voice and mannerisms are perfectly normal in front of the jury, and now all of a sudden she can't speak when the jury's gone. So she can muster the courage. Yeah, and when they had that little sidebar about how she was feeling, I don't know. Did I know this earlier? Did I talk about this earlier? Yeah, I did on my noon update. When they came back from that little sidebar before the earlier break, he said the victim. Oh, when he made the decision to proceed today, he said the defendant is perfectly capable of making an argument for herself. To not have to attend court today, and if she's capable of that, then she's capable of proceeding with these proceedings. I'm summarizing, not word for word. Yeah, it's crazy. Lori, let me do this. So the rest of jury selection really doesn't have a whole lot of involvement from her, because the way that Judge Boreski handles jury selection is those 18 people in the box. So after he gets rid of the 8, there's 43 left, and 18 of them sit in the jury box, and 16 of those 18 are going to be the jury unless the state or the defense has a particular problem, like a legally defendable problem with them. So Lori didn't. She just sat there, and whenever the judge asked her about any particular of those 18 in that box, she did not respond at all. At all. So hold on. I have one video that I want to play just to give us a little bit of a break. And this is going to be the video from Monday's hearing. And I know other creators and Justin Lum have moved these squares around so they're a little easier to see, but the resolution is horrible, but the sound is good on this one that I got directly from the court. So we're going to watch this 13 minutes of what happened Monday after Judge issued his order for the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office to bring her to court if it was even kicking and screaming. He didn't say kicking and screaming. I just said that. Figure out. So let's take a look at the makeup of the jury based upon the notes that I was able to take for these 16 people. So 8 men and 8 women. Juror number 1 is a woman, an unemployed college student. She's single and she's never served on a jury before. Juror number 2 is a technician of some kind, married, 2 children, ages 15 and 9. Never served on a jury before. Juror number 3 is a man that is an elected official of a nonprofit organization. Juror number 4 is another woman. She's like a surgery tech or something. She's been a surgery tech for like 14 years. She's a registered nurse. She is married. She has no children, and she served on a jury for a similar trial. Juror number 5 is a self-employed plumber. Has been for 27 years. Not married, no children, and has never served on a jury before. Juror number 6 is the branch manager for Arizona something credit union. I wrote down ACCU. I'll remember as A and CU is Arizona Credit Union. Single, never served on a jury before. Juror number 7 is a male. He's been working for DoorDash since the beginning of May. He's single and never served on a jury before. Missy Ann, I think it's a pretty good mix of jurors. It's from the very young to the very old. And I'm going to get to one of the jurors here that is really old. Like I'm probably not going to live to be as old as he is right now. He was a veteran in the Vietnam War, for real. Non-combat veteran. He kept pointing out multiple times. I'm like, dude, you served in the Navy during Vietnam. All right. Anyway, so we got DoorDash. Was juror number 7, but I feel, I mean, it's half, 8 men and 8 women. Most of them appear to be Caucasian, so there's not a lot of ethnic diversity in this jury pool. I don't think that matters. I mean, if I were like a minority on trial here, I might have a problem with it. But she's not a minority, except in her looniness, in her craziness, and in her ability to leave bodies in her wake and suck the live energy out of multiple people. So, and that was one of the questions during jury voir dire that Trina K asked was, the charge is conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. And just because the victim is still alive, does that mean that does anybody think that means that there can't be a conviction for conspiracy to commit first-degree murder? And nobody raised their card on that. But I'm here for justice. I'm here to see justice for the victims. All right. Juror number 8 was a female, and I wrote almost nothing down about her. I don't have a job or a marital status. All I have is 5 children and never served on a jury before. So juror 8 is a female. Juror 9 is a male. He's in the printing industry, never been married, but he does have 1 child. Oh, he's not married, has 1 child. So I don't know if that means he's divorced or if he never married his baby mama. 1 child, age 13, never served on a jury. Juror number 10. Juror number 10 is the most fascinating juror to me, and not in like the juror 15 Carl aspect. He is ancient. Like He served in the U.S. Navy during the Vietnam War. He was a lieutenant commander. He retired from the Navy, and then he worked with some kind of a missile program, and he worked enough years at that place. So it had been another 25 years before he retired from that. And his wife was a school teacher for 44 years before she retired. So, and I think he mentioned the years they retired, and it wasn't like in the recent past. It was like 2013 or 2009. I mean, it was a good 10 years ago that they retired. I noticed him from day one. I did. And I'm like, this guy's going to be an interesting character, and it will be interesting to see how he interprets Lori and her behavior and her lack of a case and her lack of witnesses. All right. Juror number 11 is another female. She does something working with government contractors. I'm not sure what. I don't remember. They say it so fast that I can't follow all of it. She's married. She has a 27 or a 21-year-old child, never served on a jury. She did mention twice that she has filed for divorce and that her soon-to-be ex-husband is unemployed. I thought that was funny. Juror number 12 is a male. He's worked for EPCOR for 6 years. He's married. He has stuff. He has 2 children, ages 13 and 8, and he's never served on a jury. Juror number 13 is a male. He's a mechanic at a local Toyota. Single with no children and never served on a jury before. Juror number 14 is a bartender. That's an interesting one. She's single. She didn't say about children. I assume single with no children, and she's never served on a jury. So we have a bartender there. She's a housewife with 6 children, one of them over the age of 18, and the other 5 are 15, 14, 13, 12, and 8. Except she's single and never served on a jury. That's all I got for her because I was so fascinated with juror number 15. So I missed juror 16's biographical information because I was so fascinated with juror 15. There are actually a lot of normal sounding jurors on this panel with a variety of biographical information, but all, fairly well put together. Like, they're capable. I mean, the only unemployed one that I saw in there was the college student. So there were some other unemployed ones in the rest of the jury pool. Not a whole lot of them. I think he was juror number 3. He said his father was a gunsmith when he was growing up, and so that's how he got to become very familiar with firearms. And of course, judge steps in and says, "Well, could that influence, your ability to be fair and impartial in this?" But she said, "Your father was a what?" And he goes, "A gunsmith." And she goes, "Oh, a gunsmith." Not dripping honey, but definitely more